Analysis of the household hierarchy in Eraserhead. Eraserhead is the story of a new father, Henry, and the complex emotions and actions that he takes in order to deal with single fatherhood. His child is badly deformed, a disruption in his life. Eventually, he must wrestle with the question of whether he should let the child live or should kill it for both him and the child's sake. The film transgresses typical social boundaries and questions by presenting the reality of parenthood rather than the idealized version that is often promoted in the media. The child in the film is one of the most visually interesting and disturbing things ever put to a live-action film. It is alien, phallic-shaped, and shiny, leaving the audience and characters wondering if it is even human at all. Upon first impression, one may admire the depiction of the child in the film as a symbolic representation of actual human infants, who are often bloody and gnarly when leaving the womb instead of the clean, full-haired babies found in mainstream films, such as Father of the Bride 2. In its raw depiction of all the negatives of parenthood, the film rebels against mainstream films that depict parenthood as magical, glorious, and beautiful all the time, or at least most of the time. Throughout the film, the audience is voluntarily subjected to watching the child wheezing labored breaths and crying in the middle of the night, disturbing her parents and generally being a nuisance that they were not prepared to deal with. The child in its crib is physically separated from the parents in their bed, though they didn't seem to live together before it was born. By the use of space, cinematography, and set design, the child is physically and immediately presented as being an other and not part of the family unit, just an ugly addition that was squeezed into a cluttered house. This disruption of the family unit, and by extension the nuclear family ideal that is presented to and by society, may be a commentary on the nature of new people or children in a relationship, in that something always changes. It is not something that can easily be ignored by the parents, and they do not seem to consider throwing it out. But the relationship between Henry and Mary has changed drastically, even though the state of it is unclear before the events of the film. The child requires constant attention, feeding, medicine, and general care. The baby's mother does not want it, opposing the social norms that women are the homemakers who stay at home with the children and fulfill their job to take care of them. When the baby is first born, Mary comments that the doctors aren't even sure it is a baby, showing that even the mother of the child cannot ignore its appearance and mannerisms.
There's a baby. It's at the hospital.
Mom!
And you're the father.
But that's impossible. It's only
Mother,
been...
they're still not sure it is a baby.
It's premature, but there's a baby. After the two of you are married, which should be very soon, you can pick the baby up.
In some mainstream films, an unexpected child is the plot device that brings together a struggling or uncommitted family. Yet it is much the opposite in Eraserhead, where the child acts as a disruption, constantly wearing down her parents beyond limits, to the point that Mary leaves Henry with the child, and he delves into a fantasy world to escape his reality. The girl in the radiator, as she is credited, is one of the most emotionally and psychosexually significant aspects and characters in the film. Henry uses the fantasy of the girl to escape his troubled marriage and situation, as he also did with the lady across the hall. The girl in the radiator takes the appearance of a pretty blonde girl dancing with nervous hands and large cheeks on her face that make her stand out as conforming, but also not being able to fit in with traditional feminine Hollywood beauties. The girl is a representation of what Henry both fears and hopes his child will become, normal. The girl is nervously performing to an unseen audience, much like the characters in the film remind the viewers of this spectacle we are both disgusted and fascinated by, the boundary of the real and fictional which is thin. Henry sees his daughter growing into a fairly normal-looking girl, but with some obvious deformities that anyone might make a comment on. He sees that she may never look fully normal, and fears that she may one day want to be seen by many if she chooses to show herself off in acting, singing, or another similar profession. The girl wants a normal life, and by all means she deserves one, but Henry fears that this may not be possible for a girl with such visually noticeable abnormalities. During the scene in which the fantasy stage begins to break, sperm-like creatures resembling the baby begin falling from the top of the stage, which the girl avoids and begins crushing under her feet. This is another aspect that reminds the audience that the girl, and by extension the deformed baby, are much more similar to one of the hypothetical us than we might find comfort in thinking. The sperms represent and enforce the idea that if the girl is to grow up, eventually she may want to reproduce, and may face rejection or humiliation at this aspect. If she wanted to have sex, a man might not want to have it with her due to her appearance, and may not want to have children with her in fear the offspring will look like her. It faces and uncomfortably brings the thought into the viewer's mind of the Freudian school of thought, and makes us both feel bad for the girl while also facing our own societal sexual biases and limitations. The repulsive figures falling from the top of the stage remind the audience that the girl knows of her appearance. She bears the curse that humans took when they first looked in a still pond. Her uncomfortable squishing replicas of the baby is tragic, in that it is a heavy-handed but effective showcase of the girl's insecurity in trying her best to get the attention away from her differences and back to her as a person. This is a reminder that she does not want to be defined by her face, but she also knows it is hard, messy, and harmful to continue to keep herself covered up. As the cult film reader exemplifies, audiences can sometimes be attracted to the challenge that a film like Eraserhead presents. In talking about cinephiles, they have a preference for films that challenge and or have philosophical journeys, an appreciation for films that are demanding. The ending scene of the film is particularly hard to watch, where Henry attempts to free his child from the confines of her bandages and free her unto the world, but ends up having to kill her out of mercy. The child has no skin protecting it from the outside, and in a misguided effort to allow it to the next stage of life, Henry becomes deathly afraid of it and kills it both out of fear and sympathy. Eraserhead is a film that revels in abnormality and transformation of the traditional household hierarchy. Henry, the father, is just as, if not more powerless than his wife Mary, and must resort to an affair to try and grasp his power back. Their child is a nuisance who takes control of their lives and begins rebelling against them as soon as it's born, as all teenagers eventually do. The figure of the other, as Roland Barthes explains, is a major strategy by which a dominant ideology maintains its hegemony. The other here is clearly the child, with the patriarchal household ideals trying desperately yet failing to assert its dominance and hegemony over the new ideas and influence of youth culture.
I used to be with it, but then they changed what it was. Now what I'm with isn't it, and what's it seems weird and scary to me. It'll happen to you.